When placing a design on a t-shirt, I try to place it about a hand's width down from the neck. With these stickers, you just peel and stick it right onto the garment, and then I add a hoop for stitching. Loosen it up just enough that the top hoop pops right down over the bottom hoop. And with garments, you want to make sure that you don't stretch it too much. So it looks like I'm pulling, but I'm just straightening it out just a tiny bit. If you stretch the fabric too much in the hoop, then when you open the hoop, your stitches will end up being loose. Here's the colors that I chose for this design. I'm using 3 strands out of the 6 strands of thread, and I'm going to make one single stitch here first, then skip a stitch length, pull my needle through, and insert my needle into the hole of the last stitch. This is called a basic back stitch, and you can find a slower tutorial for this in my stitch sampler playlist. But it's a nice way to do an outline, and we're just going to go the whole way around this first square. So every time we skip a stitch length and then insert our needle back down into the previous hole. And we're going to turn this into a whipped back stitch, which will smooth out these individual stitch lines. You won't be able to see the gaps. Once we get to the end here, we're going to come up right next to our last stitch and then slide your needle underneath your last stitch. And we're going to go from the same direction every time, bottom to top or outside to inside, and just slide your needle. And it's going to create this whipped effect to the back stitch where it smooths out with this secondary stitch the lines in between the stitches. Another added benefit to this is that if your back stitch is not super straight, this will help kind of even out the lines as well. If you find that the needle snags the paper, you can turn it around and push the eye of the needle through instead, just like this, and that'll create a smoother flow. Then at the end, insert your needle down at the end of the line. And we're going to do that the whole way around the book. Now I'm taking 3 strands of the lighter purple, and I'm doing the same thing. So just going around this square with smaller back stitches, and then we will do the whipped back stitch on this as well. I use the whipped back stitch for these squares, the whole outside of the book, and the pages, and then also for the stripes on the binding of the book. I always enjoy this one, watching it sped up. Now taking 3 strands for the heart, we're going to make a satin stitch. So make 1 straight stitch down through the middle of the heart, pull that snug, and then we're going to come up as close as we possibly can to our first stitch and go down right next to it at the bottom as close as you can. And the trick with this is to keep your stitches as close together as possible. If there's any gaps, you can go back and fill those in, but this is just a series of straight stitches that are super close together, and it will create this nice smooth shape. Just always make sure to come right up and then back down on the lines. And this creates a perfect little heart shape, and it has a nice little shine to it as well. You can always take a pen and make little guidelines for yourself as well if needed, if it would help you to have some straight lines going up and down. I recorded this in 2 parts, so I didn't record my second side of the heart here, but you get the gist. We're going to do the same thing on each side. Now for the pages, I'm using 2 strands of white and doing the whipped back stitch again. So you start with the back stitch. I'm using 2 strands so that it will be a little bit thinner than our initial purple lines. And with my metallic thread, I also did a whipped back stitch on the binding of the book. That just missed getting recorded. I'm using DMC diamond thread in the rose gold, and if you make a little loop and then push that through the eye of your needle, it will be much easier to thread your needle because metallic thread can be tricky to work with. I'm making a running stitch here, so I have a knot in the end, and it's just a series of small little straight stitches. So you just make all these little individual straight stitches with the metallic thread, and it'll give us a lovely little glitter when we're done. And then the little tiny stars you can also fill out with straight stitches. Now I'm going to speed this up a bit because I made a mistake and realized that I should not have used metallic thread for this star. It's fine for the smaller ones, but not for the large one. So we're going to go a bit out of order and I'll show you how I fix my mistake. When you're done stitching, you're going to rinse this with cold water and you'll see the paper start to dissolve as it sits. Just wash that off and you can regularly wash and dry your shirt. I do recommend air drying as much as possible to extend the life of the threads. But let me show you what happened when I took out my shirt and then I dried it. My metallic thread ended up being way too loose and you can see that here. So to fix it, I took a heat erasing pen, outlined the star so I would know where my guidelines were, and then I went ahead and cut this out. As long as you're very careful, you can always cut out work that you don't like. I cut that all out and then I restitched it. So here's how you can stitch the stars. This may seem like an odd color to use, but it was the closest thing to the rose gold that I already had in the shirt. So let's see how it works. I did this in the wrong order, but you're going to want to make a horizontal line first and then a vertical line from top to bottom. Now, just like we did with the heart, we're going to bring our needle up as close as you can to that vertical stitch and just follow the outline, going back and forth and working your way out with a satin stitch to the end point. My tiny stars worked okay like this with the metallic thread, so you can try it either way, but I definitely recommend regular thread for this large star and make sure your stitches stay tight. Then after this, you'll wash out your paper, and this is how mine turned out, and I love this color with the rose gold.